Hey folks, Kevin here. Well, it's January 23rd, 2020, and today I thought I'd share with you an experience we had last evening with Hank, our 5-year-old Doberman Pinscher, who actually got very ill as a result of eating some spoiled food. He had mycotoxins. And I really want to share with you because, you know, we're homesteaders. We do lots of canning. We have the root cellar videos we put up previously, and other videos I posted about composting and the composting processes that we go through. And I've actually posted a video on using chicken crumble, which is pelleted chicken feed that's in a crumble form, as our kitty litter, so that we don't have to use clay litter in our litter boxes for our multi-cat household. And the reason I'm mentioning these other couple of videos is because recently I've responded to some comments in each of those videos. So before I get to talking about Hank with his intoxication last night, I thought I'd share with you one comment that I've gotten in the past about with our composting. Now, if you watched our large composting video series and some of the series where I've composted weeds or composted leaves and animal waste, all of those things, one of the things I'm always talking about is the importance of doing thermophilic composting. And that's where we're really closely monitoring the temperatures of the compost pile and turning it when it gets to too warm of a temperature before the organisms switch from being aerobic to going anaerobic, so that we have the benefit of killing weed seeds and killing pathogens that are in that. And I have had comments where people would say, I'll just leave the pile there and it'll compost down and be just fine. And one of the things that always makes me nervous when I hear a comment like that, although most of the time everything will work out fine, well, you're not killing pathogens if you've got food waste, like I'm going to be talking about in a couple of moments, that molds can grow on those food waste and produce a variety of different types of toxins that can create chronic, low-level debilitating disease, even cancer, or can create sudden acute disease processes, which I'll talk about briefly. The other thing that you can't effectively do when you're doing just let the pile sit there is you're not killing those weed seeds as well. So if you're using that decomposed material in your gardens, well, then you may have to do more weeding than you have to do. And I'm all about reducing the amount of man hours that I've got to work with in our gardens. But enough said about the technique of not using turning the pile when we hit certain temperatures. That's okay if people do it. And I know that people don't have the equipment, they have the opportunity to get things, or they get too busy and they can't turn their piles. I'm not poo-pooing that. I just want to mention the possibility of certain disease processes being the possibility. I'm not saying it's going to happen, where animals could get into consuming some of that composting material, and that could be a problem. Another comment that now, one of the things we've been doing for years is we eliminated clay litter in our household, and I'll put a link to that video in the upper right hand corner, and I've done lots of Ask Me Anything questions videos about using chicken pellets or crumble, because it clumps really nicely and all. Now, we have a multi-cat household, and even if we didn't have which means we have multiple litter boxes, and the litter boxes need to be changed at least once a day, sometimes twice a day. So, and we live in a very cold temperate climate. So we know that the material that's going into the litter box, the moist material, the urine material and the feces, are getting removed from the litter box, and we maintain a humidity level inside of our house where these litter boxes are, which is relatively low. So molds like to grow in warm, moist environments. And if you're the type of person that may only have one cat in your household and you clean the litter box out once a week and it's a very humid environment that you're in, then there's a possibility of having aflatoxins being produced by three different forms of aspergillosis. Aspergillus, a fungal organism. And so they can produce these aflatoxins, which can create severe chronic diseases and create liver diseases as well as other disease processes in cats. So that's something to be aware of. Now, if you are using chicken crumble or other, and it certainly can be any vegetable matter, any food source whatsoever, even meats and dairy products, molds can grow on, and they can be very dangerous if consumed. And of course, there are many molds that are being inhaled. We're living in a different time and age, so for example, this winter, we're probably down, at least 30 inches from the amount of snow accumulation that we get by this point in time. Now, there will be thaws in between each of many of the snow accumulations, but we're probably down a good 48 inches, a good 4 feet, because we live in a snow belt here. So we live in a really cold, temperate climate. However, over the last several years, the weather systems have been changing as a result of climate change. And I know some people will poo-poo that, but the science bears it out. We are, unfortunately, creating changes in our climate, which is going to make more severe weather conditions. And as a result, in different parts of the country, there will be flooding, there'll be, with the types of construction that we have, people's homes will get wet, mold, leaky roofs, mold will get into rooms, and that can create a very dangerous environment because many of these fungal organisms, when they get into these warm, moist environments, their spores, they produce lots of spores, and on the outer coating of some of these spores, these mycotoxins are there. They're very, very small particles. They get inhaled, and they can create nervous system disorders, things that may potentially even contribute to things like Alzheimer's. And certainly we see lots of chronic inflammatory conditions in people as a result of being exposed to moldy environments. So, and certainly our ethics here are self-care, earth care, people care, and future care. So the first thing is self-care, taking care of ourselves, our family, our pets, our animals. All of those things are so important to us that we want to make sure that we take every precaution possible to minimize our exposure to harmful environments and to try to decrease the development of these harmful substances from being formed. Now, having said all of that, yesterday, in a couple of recent videos, I posted videos about, working in the root cellar. So it's wintertime, I'm not working on the greenhouse, not working on the workshop right now. So I've been spending a lot of time trying to get further, more progress done in the root cellar. And of course, for the last few years, we've had lots of our canned goods down in the root cellar and in boxes and all. And the first year, I didn't really maintain the humidity level where the canned goods were stored. So one of the things I want to do is change over all the shelving, get all the cardboard, get any woody materials out of that area in case, like in some areas, there's going to be a high humidity level. So I don't want any wood or paper products, any vegetable organic materials in those areas other than the types of root stock that I want to be preserving, our carrots, our potatoes, those sorts of things. They require high moisture content, need to check it relatively frequently to make sure there aren't any damaged vegetable matters down there, or fruit if it's the apples that are being housed in an adjacent area. So we want to check those things at least once a week to make sure that we aren't having any breakdown of these materials, which can promote the mold starting. Now, in the larger part of our root cellar, we have all of our canned goods, which we have a low humidity level. It's still cold in there, but we have a low humidity level and ventilation. So when I was taking a lot of these canned goods, I saw that some of the seals on some of the tops had broken and there was mold on top of that. So I went outside, it's the middle of winter time here, dug down through the snow, emptied out the canned goods into around the bases of the trees. Now, during the winter months, I'm no longer using the vermicompost bins anymore because we live in an area where we get so much snow accumulation over the winter months, and I have different areas where the herbivores eat, and I'll make videos about those things in the food forest. But it hasn't been a problem over the years of me taking, if we have spoiled canned goods or food goods, for me to break those materials down, spread them out, cover them up really well with either paper products, wood chips, and those sorts of things. So I do that in the food forest. So those foods break down and help to throw some of the nutrition back into the root zone of the companion plants and the fruit and nut trees that are in the food forest. Well, I did this over the last couple of weeks because I probably had maybe 6 or 8 canned goods that the seals had broken on the top and there was obvious mold in there. So I went out, emptied the quart jars into that area, covered it up with wood chips and all. We had a nice snowfall the next day, so we had several inches of snow on top of it. But as I mentioned previously, we aren't getting as much snow as we usually get this winter. The last couple of winters, fewer and fewer snowfalls. And so it's only maybe 6 or 8 inches of snow covering up the area where that was. And I went out, and now I've been working indoors the last couple of days, doing paperwork, taxes, that sort of thing. So I needed to get a little bit of exercise, so I went out yesterday. Hank and I went out to the root cellar. Hank stayed outside sniffing around. He was as usual, happy-go-lucky, wild and crazy 5-year-old Doberman, running around and exploring, going through the food forest, smelling and sniffing everything around. And I went inside, put up a little more shelving inside of the root cellar. Then I decided I was going to load up Pepe with some wood for the wood-burning stove here in the house. And as soon as I got done loading up Pepe, our utility vehicle, I looked over and I could see underneath one of the nectarine trees where I had put some of that moldy stuff, Hank had dug down in that area and was eating something. So I yelled at him. I said, geez, he's going to get into some moldy food. And basically I dismissed it right after that point. He was acting perfectly normally. Everything was good. I put the wood inside of the wood stove, came in, and I started a fire for Hank because he'd been outside for hours and all. And so we started a little wood stove fire, which he likes to lay in front of the wood stove. I went upstairs and resumed working on some of the paperwork that I had to do. Now he got into the material underneath the tree at about probably 3:45 p.m. Last evening. And I think Thea got home. Her practice closes up about 6:30. She has some paperwork and phone calls to clients and all, let them know about their pets. And she got home probably, I'm thinking it was about 8 o'clock. I didn't actually check. But when she came in, I come downstairs at that point, and I'm just wrapping up my work project there. And when I came downstairs, I could see a large pile of vomit on the living room floor, and came into the kitchen area, and Thea was standing there, and she says, there's something wrong with Hank. And I could see in the den, I could see a large a volume of diarrhea that he had, and I could see that he was trembling, he was salivating quite a bit, and those were the first couple of things that I noticed. And I thought, oh gosh, one of the things we always think about when we have these large breed dogs like Dobermans or Great Danes, Mastiffs, you think about their stomachs twisting inside of his abdomen. So I immediately went right over to him, and I had already forgotten about him getting into the material underneath the nectarine tree at this point. I didn't think anything of it. So I went over and I palpated his abdomen. I felt really good that I didn't feel a distended stomach, and seeing the large pile of vomit on the floor really reduces the likelihood that he had a GDV, where the stomach actually twists inside of his abdomen and blocks off the esophagus, which makes it almost impossible for him to vomit up all that food. And that's why the stomach distends and his abdomen they become really rigid, which is an absolute surgical emergency if that does happen. So when I felt his abdomen, I said, geez, it's down. Then I said, oh yeah, he's got the large pile of vomit in the living room, so it's very unlikely that he's obstructed or that he's twisted his stomach. And he was trembling very, very much, and he was trying to get water out of his water dish. And then I noticed, geez, there was drips of saliva all over the place. And then I looked at his eyes, and I could see his pupils were very dilated. So here we have classic symptoms of a mycotoxin. So when I say mycotoxin, when we talk about myco referring to fungus molds, and toxins certainly being taken into the body system and having some damaging effects. So he had tremorogenic mycotoxicosis, basically. So he had tremors as a result of this. And this type of toxin, now there are hundreds of different toxins that are produced by fungal organisms. This isn't the same toxin that a couple of different species of Aspergillus create, which is the aflatoxins that I talked about in the kitty litter. And it isn't the type of mycotoxins that you inhale from inhaling moldy areas, mold as well. And I've talked in previous videos, I forgot to mention this, about really taking precautions. So if somebody's delivering wood chips to your place, and sometimes the guys will be, I'm sorry I'm going off on a sidetrack, but I want to get this point in. When they're chipping, they may only have a small volume of wood chips that they get from one site, and they leave it in there. It might be in there for a couple of days. They go to another site. There's not a full truckload yet, and so they wait until they get a full truckload. And then when they unload the unit, some of it's caked together because of the mycelium. The fungus has really started to take effect, especially during the summertime when it's nice and warm and there's lots of green leafy material. Well, all those molds can produce spores, and they, if inhaled, can create many different chronic low-grade inflammatory conditions, but an acute respiratory and problems with your central nervous system. Now, enough with that. I'm getting back to Hank now. So I could see that he was salivating, he was trembling quite a bit, and then it dawned on me, oh my God, this is mycotoxicosis. And that's right, there was canned goods underneath that nectarine tree, and he was digging down. And there wasn't much there to get into, but he evidently got enough of a dose that it actually caused this whole distress. So let's play it back. Now we know that Hank got into some moldy canned goods that were discarded, put into the food forest so that it could give nutrients back to a tree. He consumed some volume of that. Now, these mycotoxins are rapidly absorbed from the digestive system, and he was pumped. When he goes outside with me, I have to try and get him to calm down because he wants to spend time with me. I actually had Pepe out that I was getting wood with, and he likes to bounce back and forth in front of Pepe and run alongside of me, run past me, go behind me and all. So his circulatory system was really super pumped up. Then we came into the house. It was past his eating time. He was begging for his food. I got his diet out, got the fire started, fed him his food. He has plenty of access to fresh water, and went upstairs. So now we have this situation where within about Within 15 minutes of him having ingested the mycotoxins, a small amount of the mycotoxins, he had ingested a large volume of food. And as I mentioned, these mycotoxins, and this is penetrem A, I believe it's called, unless they've changed things in recent years. So this mycotoxin gets absorbed within, 15 minutes, gets into the circulatory system. And if the dog's really pumped up and all, like I had Hank there, things really get going. One really good thing is I fed him his food as soon as it came in. One of the things that happens when you give a well-hydrated dog his dog food and it's a dry kibble, that starts to absorb all the water as well, which sort of delays that toxin from getting in, the rest of the toxin to get into the circulation, although it gets in there pretty darn quickly. So even though he ingested a relatively small amount of the mycotoxins, which are really potent, he got a large bolus of food right away, of dry pelleted food, which really aided in the absorption and delaying the absorption into his circulatory system, or not necessarily delaying it, but yes, delaying it, decreasing the rapidity of that getting into and the total volume getting into his circulation. Then he probably, within a short period of time, vomited, then had diarrhea, started salivating like crazy, had a tummy ache, pupils dilated, salivated, and these are all classic examples also of, we think of strychnine poisoning. So it's not necessarily the symptoms that I'm describing isn't just with this. And the other thing he wasn't falling down, but he was ataxic, meaning drunk-like. So he's a little wobbly with his limbs. So this is both, so it attacks our autonomic nervous system, and our autonomic nervous system has complementary systems. A sympathetic nervous system, which most people have heard of, and that's the fight or flight component, and it has a complementary and equally opposing parasympathetic nervous system component of the autonomic nervous system. So we got the sympathetic, which is fight or flight. So something stresses you out, a deer runs out in front of you in the car, you hit the brakes quickly, something happens, your body responds, the norepinephrine surges. But the other things so that's part of your sympathetic nervous system. So the blood goes away from your guts, it goes to your muscles, and also you can run away or fight, that sort of thing. Then there's our parasympathetic nervous system, and our parasympathetic nervous system is the rest, recovery, relaxation, digestion, that sort of system. So when you go to eat food, you create more saliva to help with the enzymatic breakdown of food. You take blood away from all your musculature and your brain and all, and you might get a little bit sleepy and send it to your digestive system and all. So it's a rest and recovery. So they're complementary, but they're at opposite ends of the spectrum. And our autonomic nervous system, that part of our nervous system, balances these things out. It attacks other parts. These mycotoxins actually affect, they stimulate and inhibit simultaneously different components. So we get these tremors, and we get a feeling of like being somewhat disoriented and confused. And I can think of times when I had some severe when I had a severe gastrointestinal disease process going on, and I needed a surgery because I was obstructed. Well, all of these toxins start going into your system, and you just feel like crap. And that's basically how Hank felt. He felt very ill. He couldn't drink very well. He couldn't coordinate his body so much. So what are some of the concerns when we see this? So because I'm an internist, a veterinary internist, I recognize all these things. Now, I haven't done emergency medicine in years, which emergency clinicians would be more likely to see these things. General practitioners will see them if they see emergencies, but as an internist, I dealt with critically ill patients, patients that had either chronic debilitating disorders, or they had they were comatose, or they needed to be put on a ventilator, those sorts of things, or they needed to be put on dialysis, whatever it is. So I dealt with disease processes that were much different than these acute conditions where dogs get into something and then really rapidly respond. Now, the good thing about acute illness, often these things can resolve if you monitor them closely. So what are some of the dangerous things? So this, fortunately and unfortunately, unfortunately, if you get a dog to the emergency clinic too late, then it's probably not advisable to do some of the treatments that you would do if you had the patient real early. So if you saw the dog ingesting these toxins and the very first clinical signs of symptoms showing up, geez, you'd want to get them to vomit, to eliminate, get all that stuff that they ingested out of their digestive system. But if it's been in the body for a while, then it becomes more of a concern, because the more neurologically affected that they are, or if you're trying to control all their tremors, they're shaking and twitching, or sometimes they go into seizures, then you don't want to be making them vomit. You don't want to be giving them activated charcoal, because that could be aspirated, could be brought up from their stomach and get into their airway. And I don't want to get too much into the medical stuff, but I thought that those things might be important to know. So getting on top of these things, and so how would you do it? So always having your veterinarian's phone number available, always knowing the emergency clinic as well, and number. And certainly you may want to even control the ASPCA, Animal Poison Control Center, APCC. So you can Google that and look that information up. And I'm sure they have a website now to go over some of this information as well. So if your pets show signs of being different than normal, and the symptoms of trembling, salivating, diarrhea, vomiting, becoming ataxic, becoming drunken, walking, can't get up, that is an emergency situation. Because my wife and I are both veterinarians, we were able to deal with this. Now, if his temperature went up, so one of the things we did do was we made sure that his temperature did not go up. His temperature was just about normal, about 101 and 101.7, I think. But when they start trembling, those are fasciculations with the muscles, that generates heat, and they become hyperthermic. Or if they're vomiting a lot or having repeated bouts of vomiting, and they're salivating and having diarrhea, well, they can be dehydrated and develop severe electrolyte imbalances as well, and may need to be put on IV fluids if these things aren't caught right away. Now, these things were caught relatively soon, within a couple of hours after he had vomited and had diarrhea, so he had already probably evacuated most of the toxins, and so I didn't think he would be absorbing more from his digestive system. So we wanted to monitor his temperatures, make him comfortable. We gave him subcutaneous fluids. Now, often many of my clients over the years would be confused with intravenous fluids. So IV fluids, they come in the same bags, those big clear 1 liter bags. But if it's in the hospital, sometimes they'll put a catheter in a vein and give it intravenously, which you can't give it super fast when you're going intravenously. Or sometimes they'll take it and put it underneath the skin, and it'll look like a little camel hump on your pet when that happens. And there was no need to race and get IV fluids going in. We took the fluids and put it underneath the skin. He gave him a full liter. And so that would help to maintain a lower body temperature, maintain his hydration until he could drink well as well. all things worked out really well for Hank. He's doing very well today. I went out to the area where he had gotten into the material and covered that up with some cardboard and a few pieces of wood on top of that for right now. But these are things to think about as a homesteader, as a person who wants to not put those food wastes into the garbage, which I applaud you for doing. Not putting it into the garbage and trying to recycle, repurpose it, feed the trees, feed the lawn, compost, do vermicompost. Okay, I just got the message that the video recorder turned off. So I think I'll just end up by saying I just wanted to share these couple of thoughts that I had after Hank's sudden onset of an acute illness that was caused by me not taking the necessary steps to make those materials not retrievable. So we also have bird feeders around here, and the squirrels come down, get into the bird feeders, the seed falls on the ground, lots of the birds eat them up, but Hank will go and eat those. We also have an aviary where we have birds in as well, and Hank likes getting into all those materials. Well, just like we talked, like I mentioned with the kitty litter, all your different seeds and nuts. I mean, there's aflatoxins that people worry about ingesting by eating peanuts. So seeds and some nuts and cheeses, moldy cheese, those sorts of things. Things that we think are disgusting, our dogs will eat. Hank will eat them all. So those are things to be aware of as a pet owner and as a homesteader, and trying to do the right thing, not letting these waste materials go into the landfills, and trying to do all we can to make our property and our planet more resilient. So I'll end this video at this point. Feel free to make comments, to share your experiences below as well. I think that's really important to do. I didn't want to get too much into the medical jargon here or make medical recommendations, just to make you aware of some of these things that are going on. So if you have any comments or questions, leave them below. If you found this video of value, please give us a thumbs up. Please share this video with your animal-loving friends. And by all means, folks, have a safe and beautiful day. Bye-bye now.